Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American historian, Alan Searcy. Glad you guys are with me today. I got a fun show. I've been telling you guys, don't forget our big book giveaway this month, going all through January. If you subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find the show, leave a review and then screenshot it over to Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook or Instagram. And I'll put you into a drawing for 5 free books that will be given away in early February. And if you win, you get to pick the book. I've got, 40 books to choose from. You could pick Below the Trestle. You could pick Sausage King, Southern Ghost Stories, West Nashville. Ghost Stories, Graveyard Tales, Chicago. You get to pick the book. I got a lot to choose from. But anyway, so I've been telling you guys, send me questions on Facebook and Instagram. And I got one from Jim Knight, I guess it was yesterday, asking about New York City ghost stories, my favorite New York City ghost story. And it's so hard to pick just one. When I wrote the New York City book, Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, New York City, a couple years ago, it was like I was cheating. A place like Brentwood, Tennessee, I spent, 9 years or so chasing down ghost stories for a small little town that was a farming community outside of Nashville. But New York City, man, it was like the stories found me. I was cheating. There was so much history, so much material to choose from. I left a lot of stuff on the floor that I could have made into something. But New York City has so much history. And I guess my favorite ghost story, man, I don't know. But something that sticks out to me is I stayed at the Hotel Chelsea. And if you know anything about the Hotel Chelsea, it's a historic hotel. A lot of folks have died there. Sid Vicious, Nancy, his girlfriend, that's where they, he killed her and she died and all that stuff. Well, I was staying in a room there on the first floor. And I was in there and I was actually working on my book. I went to the Empire State Building and took some pictures, got some notes because I was writing about the Empire State Building. I'm in the room, sitting there working on the book, and all of a sudden this plate in this cup over on the counter starts rattling. And nothing else is moving in the room. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the subway is under the hotel. It's got to be the subway, right? So I kind of chalked it up. I didn't think much about it. And then I was about to leave, and I was talking to one of the guys at the front desk about ghost stories. And it's like, yeah, something weird happened to me. I was in the room working on the computer, and all of a sudden I heard this rattling noise. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I just had to be the subway. He said, well, sir, the subway doesn't go underneath the hotel. So who knows? I was told I was in an active area of the hotel, but I don't know. It was really cool, really creepy, really fun. It was actually really wild for me. I actually broke my toe chasing my son at the zoo the week before. And I walked around New York City. And when you get to New York City, it's kind of like the Vegas Strip. Oh, that didn't look too far. I'll just walk there. So I walked 11 miles in 2 days with a broken toe. But yeah, I was hurting when I got home. But yeah, it's so much to see, so much to do. I remember I woke up that one morning. Oh, the Brooklyn Bridge, that's 3 miles away. I can walk that. So I walked across the Brooklyn Bridge from Chelsea, where I was staying. But yeah, New York City, so much history there. I love New York City. So it got me thinking, why not do a story on some New York City stuff? And I've been doing a lot of ghost stories. Why not do some true crime? Just weird, wild stuff. So in May 1981, horror fans were flocking to theaters to see Friday the 13th, Part 2. They sat in the dark cinemas and watched Jason Voorhees. But while New Yorkers were paying for a controlled scare, a real-life monster was preparing to step out of the shadows. Within a month, the Big Apple would find out the real evil doesn't wear a hockey mask. It doesn't live in the woods. It lives in the parks, on the subway steps, and in the crowded streets of Lower Manhattan. Today, we look at the summer of 1981, the summer of the Lower Manhattan slasher. A spree of violence so surgical, so rapid, and so random that it paralyzed a city already struggling with a reputation for chaos. June 27, 1981. It was a typical, humid summer Saturday night. Sarah Roosevelt Park was a refuge for the city's homeless and those looking to catch a breeze. Among them was 41-year-old Charles Edwards. He was asleep on a park bench, just trying to make it to morning. He never saw the blade. Edwards woke up to a searing heat in his neck. It wasn't just a cut, it was a deep arterial opening. As he screamed, a patrol officer nearby heard the terror in his voice. Edwards survived, but he was just the patient zero of a night that was about to spiral out of control. Less than an hour later, at 11:30, Miguel Encarmion stumbled into St. Vincent's Hospital. He was drenched, not in sweat, but his own blood. He told doctors he had been sleeping in Washington Square Park when a shadowy figure opened his throat and vanished. And the police were barely beginning to connect the two dots when the report started flooding in like a dam breaking. Over at Madison Square Park, 3 men, Gus Logus, Willie Townsend, and Lawrence Ruchman, they were slashed in their sleep. 8th Avenue, Charles Vann, Jerome Jordan, they'd been ambushed. Penn Station, Robert Brown, just walking to a taxi, suddenly felt the cold steel of a razor. By the time the sun rose, 8 men had been attacked. The mythology was chillingly consistent. A single deep slash to his neck. The victims gave a description that would soon be plastered across every precinct. A stocky man, scruffy, wearing a maroon jacket and black slippers. He looked just like another person living on the streets, which is exactly why it was so dangerous. He was invisible. So the NYPD, they're in a frenzy. Think about the logistics there. The slasher was moving between the parks and transit hubs with terrifying speed. A psychologist was brought in, profiling a man with a deeply disturbed relationship with violence. But profiling, it doesn't stop a razor. On June 30th, the slasher struck Roy Miley in Stuyvesant Park. Then a brief silence. For 5 days, the city held its breath. Then came July 5th. And this wasn't just a continuation, it was an escalation. Roy Miller was standing on a street corner, not sleeping, not vulnerable, when he was hit. He noted something crucial. The attacker was now clean-shaven. He was adapting. He was cleaning up. Later that night, in Sarah D. Roosevelt Park, the violence turned gruesome. An unidentified vagrant was slashed so deeply that the first responding officer remarked, "You could put your fist in there." The night ended in a body count. Harold Wilson became the first to die from his wounds. The Lower Manhattan slasher was no longer just a source of injury. He was a murderer. At 2:45 on July 6th, the luck of Charles Sears finally ran out. 2 officers spotted him in Soho. He matched the description, but the giveaway was the blood on his pants. When they tackled him, they found his weapon, a jagged, broken straight razor, still stained with the blood of his victims. But if the police thought the horror was over, the legal circus was just beginning. Sears was a legal nightmare. He initially pleaded guilty, but he retracted it. His reasoning? You're going to love this. He claimed his own lawyer was being controlled by voodoo practiced by Sears' own family. Sounds like a bad B-movie script. But in a 1984 courtroom, it was enough to have him declared unfit for trial. He was sent to a psychiatric center, a move that left victims and their families feeling like justice wasn't being served. Eventually, the doctors at the Mid-Hudson Psychiatric Center decided Sears was fit enough to face the music. He was transferred to Rikers Island. And for those who don't know, Rikers is the mid-1980s. It was a powder keg. It was overpopulated, violent, and governed by its own set of brutal rules. Sears, the man who terrorized the defenseless in their sleep, was now in a place where everyone was awake and everyone was dangerous. August 1st, 1985. It wasn't a grand conspiracy or a hit ordered by a victim's family that ended Charles Sears. It was a payphone. Sears got into an argument with another inmate, John Velez. Velez was a career criminal, and for robbery. He wasn't a slasher. He didn't have really a psychological profile. He was a man with a makeshift knife and a short fuse. Velez stabbed Sears multiple times in the chest and limbs. Sears, the man who had watched 15 men bleed from the neck, managed to stagger back to his cell. He was rushed to Elmhurst Hospital, but the irony was complete. The man who lived by the blade died by it. He bled out before the doctors could save him. So the story of the Lower Manhattan slasher, it's often overshadowed by the glamour of fictional monsters like Jason or Freddy, back in the 80s. But for the 15 men who felt that cold steel in the summer of 1981, the nightmare was very, very real. And Charles Sears didn't have a grand motive. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a violent, disturbed man who exploited the vulnerability of a city and its most marginalized citizens. His death at Rikers Island, it wasn't poetic justice. It was just the final, violent punctuation mark on a very dark chapter of New York history. So the streets of Manhattan, they're much brighter now, safer for many. But if you walk through Sarah Roosevelt Park late at night, and the wind catches a certain way, you might find yourself looking over your shoulder, checking the shadows for a man in a maroon jacket. So let's head down the Hudson River, over to Staten Island, where another sinister New York City slasher is waiting. Every town has a boogeyman. In Pennsylvania, kids whisper about Hookman. In Tennessee, we fear the Bell Witch. These stories serve a purpose. They keep kids from wandering too far into the woods or staying out, past dark. But on Staten Island, the story was different. For decades, the name Cropsey was the ultimate campfire terror. He was the escaped mental patient, the disfigured hermit living in the ruins of an abandoned asylum. He was a myth designed to scare. Until 1987. That was the year the people of Staten Island realized the boogeyman wasn't a ghost. And he didn't have a hook for a hand. He was a toothless, balding vagrant named Andre Rand. And the place he called home was a graveyard of broken dreams called Willowbrook. Now we're going to be stripping away the folklore, talk about the cold, hard facts of the Pied Piper of Staten Island. So to understand Cropsey, you have to understand Willowbrook State School. It's supposed to be a school for children with intellectual disabilities. But by 1965, it was a warehouse for human misery. Built for 4,000 people, it held 6,000. In 1972, a young Geraldo Rivera broke into the facility with a camera. What he found was, quote-unquote, the last disgrace. Children naked, covered in their own filth, neglected, and skin and bone thin. It wasn't a school, it was a hellscape. Now imagine being a kid growing up nearby. You see this massive, decaying brick buildings. You hear the stories of what goes on inside. Naturally, the legend of Cropsey grows out of that rot. The escape patient narrative wasn't just a story, it was a reflection of the institutional failure right in their backyard. But here's the objective truth. The most dangerous thing at Willowbrook wasn't a patient. It was a man on the payroll. From 1966 to 1968, a man named Frank Russian worked there, as he was a custodian, a physical therapy aide. He went by a few names, eventually settling on Andre Rand. This is where he learned the layout of the tunnels. This is where he learned how to navigate the woods. And most chillingly, this is where he learned how to hunt the most vulnerable members of society. Andre Rand didn't just wake up one day as a monster. His rap sheet started long before the Cropsey headlines. In 1969, he was arrested for kidnapping a 9-year-old girl in the Bronx. He served a mere 16 months. In 1983, while working as a school bus driver, let that sink in. He took 11 children from YMCA to New York Airport without their parents' knowledge. He bought them a meal and just took them. He got 10 months for that. But the legend and the man finally collided in the summer of 1987. Jennifer Schwiger was 12 years old. She had Down syndrome. She was the kind of person Willowbrook was built to protect. And she was exactly the kind of victim Andre Rand was looking for. On a warm July day, Jennifer vanished. Witnesses reported seeing her walking alongside a balding, toothless man. For 35 days, Staten Island was a war zone of search parties, 300 cops, 100 volunteers, cadaver dogs, and even a psychic combed the island. Well, they found her in a shallow grave on the grounds of the now abandoned Willowbrook facility. She was buried just a short distance from a makeshift campsite. The man who lived in that campsite? Andre Rand. The boogeyman had a face, and it was a face the community had seen for years, lurking in the woods, camping in the ruins of the school where he used to work. So the trial was a circus. While everyone knew Rand was the killer, the physical evidence was a nightmare to piece together. He was charged with Jennifer's murder, but the jury only convicted him of kidnapping. He got 25 years to life. Years later, in 2004, they finally linked him to the 1981 disappearance of 7-year-old Holly Ann Hughes. Again, the murder charge just wouldn't stick, but the kidnapping did. Another 25 to life. So here's the blunt reality. Andre Rand's believed to have killed at least 6 people between 1972 and 1981. He's currently 80 years old. He's still sitting in a prison cell, and he'll likely die behind the bars. He's allegedly bragged to other inmates about his crimes, finally dropping the innocent vagrant act he played for decades. But the damage was done. The legend of Cropsey didn't die with Rand's arrest. It just got darker. For the people of Staten Island, the woods were never the same. The urban legend had validated in the most horrific way possible. You weren't just afraid of the dark. You were afraid of the man living in the woods who used to change the bed sheets at the hospital. Willowbrook was finally torn down in 1987, the same year Jennifer Schwigger was found. Today, parts of the land belong to the College of Staten Island. Students walk over the same ground where Andre Rand dug his graves. The story of Cropsey is a reminder that legends usually come from a place of truth. The escape patient wasn't the threat. The threat was a systemic neglect of a facility like Willowbrook and a man like Andre Rand who thrived in its shadow. Parents still tell their kids to stay out of the woods, naturally. But they aren't talking about a ghost with a hook anymore. They're talking about the real-life boogeyman who proved that the truth is always more terrifying than the folklore. So if you want some more New York City ghost stories, I do have a book, Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, New York City. I alluded to it earlier. The Empire State Building, the supposedly the sea monster in Long Island Sound. There's so many crazy, wild ghost stories. A lot of Native American stuff there, surprisingly. So, yeah, check out Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, New York City. And if you have Kindle or Audible Plus, they're free to read or free to listen to on those platforms. I know Kindle is kind of the way of the world, and everybody's listening to stuff nowadays. You're listening to a podcast. A lot of folks listen to Audible. But all my books are on Audible: Ghost Stories, Graveyard Tales, New York City, Southern Ghost Stories, Downtown Nashville, Hexed. I mean, all my books, you can find those on all the Amazon platforms. Also, be sure to follow Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram. Send me questions. I got that one I answered earlier today. It led me to do a New York City episode. So, yeah, I'm always eager to engage with you guys, answer questions. It's a whole lot of fun. I plan on doing a Q&A show probably in February. Kind of stockpiling some questions. Occasionally I try to answer one or two. But also, don't forget the big book giveaway I got going on. Subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Send a screenshot to Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook or Southern Ghost Stories on Instagram to be entered into the drawing. So I'm Alan Searcy, the American Historian. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you back in a few more days. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Val Halloween. All that and much more at MonsterCityMadhouse.com.